Back to school. No. Um, school's ending. End of school. Almost summer. No, that's the middle of summer. Perfect time for new things. Uh, we're gonna talk about one of the more important and underrated sets of the past few years. Welcome to Arcavios. Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy. Okay, it seems like we lost Bruce, and we're gonna do this anyway. While we're looking for him, let's talk about Strixhaven, School of Mages. It's one of my favorite sets of the past few years, and I know that that is a divisive opinion. It seems to either people like it or hate it, and I don't see enough people loving it, which is why I want to talk about it. I like talking about things that are positive. I want to talk about the positive side of things. See, with Strixhaven, there are a few things you need to keep in mind. Mystical Archives changed the game. It was amazing. It was the right direction for limited product, and I think overall really made older cards a little bit more accessible for newer players. I'll get into that in a bit, but today we're also going to talk about a few of the rule changes, a few of the new to this set mechanics, and talk about one of the biggest things, the shake-up to the color pairs. Commander 2021 was the Strixhaven Commander decks. These were the year's allotment of Commander product, but we all know that since 2020, the year of Commander, we get Commander decks for every set, every standard set, kind of really any auxiliary set as well. But the thing with these decks is that they really did something to shake up the color pairs. The set as a whole obviously did as well, but they were really cemented in these decks. One of my favorite things came out of this Commander product, which was the keyword Demonstrate. For those who don't know, Demonstrate is a keyword ability first printed on 5 cards in Commander 2021. We need more. We need more than 5, because this is my dream, baby. Demonstrate says, when you cast this spell, you may copy it. If you do, choose an opponent to also copy it. Players may choose new targets for their copies. My favorite is Incarnation Technique. Well, I also like Creative Technique. Which one do I want to talk about? Let's talk about Creative Technique. Shuffle your library, then reveal cards from the top of it until you reveal a non-land card. Exile that card and put the rest onto the bottom of the library in a random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. That's like a fun little removal-less chaos warp. I'm sure that there's a word for it. Itali? Kind of? I don't know. Incarnation Technique says mill 5 cards, then return a creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield. So, Incarnation Technique is definitely a little bit more powerful in terms of, obviously, like, you get to choose. But also, with Incarnation Technique, you can choose an opponent to copy this that doesn't have anything in their graveyard. So then they copy it, fail to find, then you get 2 of this spell. I really like the the multiplayer aspect of this mechanic. I'm surprised I didn't bring it up during my little vignette about multiplayer mechanics, but what I like about these two cards is, and I mean the whole cycle really, is that it has a way about the politics around this mechanic that it really does a good job of making other people feel like they're involved in your choices. With creative technique, it's this wild, chaotic thing. And it's got a lot of text. So your opponent, and generally I'm talking about metas like mine and Bruce's, where not everybody's always keeping up on the cards. You may even come across somebody who knows what this card does. And there's not really much anything anybody can do about the copies. If you let somebody else copy it and you get the original and a copy, it's going to be harder to counter both, but also just, you play this and you're like, hey, I'm going to demonstrate it, or you're going to demonstrate it, you choose a person that you think can help you the most, and they feel great. They feel great about getting a copy for free, but you also get a copy for free, and you get the spell. I mean, 5 mana to do the thing I just said, either of them, is pretty good for the most part. It's a sorcery, so I guess it could be cheaper, but you're getting 2 of that. There's never going to be a time, really, that you're not going to. Moving on to Mystical Archives. Mystical Archives was, for those who don't know, Mystical Archives were like the booster fun slot for Strixhaven. And what this meant was that any of your draft packs had a slot dedicated to Mystical Archives. Now, all of these cards were reprints except for, I believe, one, which was a preprint print, which was Abundant Harvest. Abundant Harvest, I believe, was planned to be first printed, because obviously it was printed here, in Modern Horizons 2. And they had announced this, hey, this is a cool card coming up from a cool new set. But ultimately, it was, first printed in Strixhaven, Mystical Archives. But this idea that you had this book of cards, a library of spells. They were instants and sorceries from Magic's past. They were iconic. They were the things people think about when they think of Magic. But then also some little other ones. There were a few cards in there that were banned in some formats and not banned in others. And generally speaking, these cards were legal to play in Strixhaven Limited or anything that involved Strixhaven booster packs. But the Mystical Archive cards themselves were not legal. They didn't bring anything to standard. They were not standard legal unless they were already in standard. But it's a really cool idea to have. Obviously, we get showcase arts every set, but it was really cool to have something so flavorfully on point. You're a student at this college. You got, the history of Magic behind you. You've got these very cool, you're learning how to do spells, and these are your textbooks. I hope we see something going forward with maybe creatures or enchantments, and who knows, maybe the next time we go to Arcavios, we'll see that. So with Strixhaven, you've got, like I was saying, Mystical Archives, which is all reprints except for one card. Now, you've got the rest of Strixhaven, which is 275 cards. All of those are brand new cards, except for one, which I believe is Grinning Ignis. Grinning Ignis. There we go. That's the only reprint in the base set of Strixhaven. It's just a cool little fact. It's almost like a yin and yang of the set and Mystical Archive, but I think that it really kind of goes to show how deep into wanting to make this new plane and this just new idea of what Magic could be. It really showed the effort put in, even if it was just, a lot of functional reprints, which there weren't that many. I think there were probably a dozen functional reprints, but the other 263 cards were brand new and exciting and brought a lot of new not a lot of new mechanics. I think there were 3 in the main set that were some of them were good. We had Lessons and Learn, which were fine, not really super relevant in any of the formats that I play. I guess I could probably make a Learn deck in our 60-card casual, but the fact that Commander doesn't have a sideboard made Learn, I think, just looting, because Learn is a mechanic that says you may reveal a lesson card you own from outside the game, your sideboard, and put it into your hand, or discard a card to draw a card, which is not looting. The other one, rummaging? I don't know. Correct me in the comments. Do it. Then we had Magecraft, which I believe is... it really is the starting point for these landfall-esque mechanics. I think we're going to see, a whole cycle of this type of mechanic, because we've got landfall, then we have Magecraft, which is whenever you cast or copy a spell, this triggers. It's nice that it's not it's not spell. It's whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, it triggers. And overall, it started this cycle where you've got landfall, you've got Magecraft for instants and sorceries, landfalls for lands, if that wasn't clear. And then we've got, I think it's called Alliance, from Streets of New Capenna. Alliance is whenever a creature enters a battlefield under your control, trigger. So I'm sure, even to an extent, oh yeah, Constellation. That was before this. Never mind. Constellation is whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, trigger. So while it's not the beginning of a cycle, it's a continuation of a cycle, and a very important one of that, because I think that a lot of spellslingery decks can find these cards not only super helpful, but also just a really real way to ground the choices that they make. I think that it's super important in decks where you may be being countered more. And, say, what is it? Archmage Emeritus says, Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, draw a card. That's super helpful in those decks, because if your plan gets interrupted, you're still getting, not necessarily a lot of value, but you're getting value in where you can continue your turn. You're not completely wiped out. And then we've got a new Evergreen, and when they announced this, they knew it was going to be Evergreen. Mechanic, keyword. Ward. Ward, I feel is very divisive as well, and maybe that's what made Strixhaven even more divisive. Ward is whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays N, where N is the ward number. So it's for Adrix and Nev Twincasters, Ward 2. If they try to target it with a spell or ability, anyone who's not you, so opponents, if they try to target it, it gets countered unless that player pays 2. I really like this ability. I think it's very interesting take on hexproof, but it is awfully pedantic. If you're in play groups that are slightly above ours, it's going to cause a lot of feel bads because somebody's going to be like, oh, well, like it does, like you did successfully get it onto the stack. You did target this thing, but it's countered. While in our play group, it generally is just like, oh, well, this got wards. So like if you want to pay, it'll resolve. And I think like there's probably a point in the game where it does become like, all right, well, like you knew that this had ward. So like, yeah, it does get countered unless you pay the ward thing. And I like where they've gone with this since. I mean, we have plenty of ward costs, you know, pay 3 life, discard a card, sacrifice a creature, these types of things, where it is just a little bit more complex. And that doesn't necessarily mean bad. And, you know, plenty of people have pointed out, like, oh, like Ward 8, that's essentially just hexproof. And, like, yes, but, like, if you've got the 8 or, you know, you've got infinite mana, you can pay that. It makes it so that there are more iterations of what can happen. And I think that that's really neat. And I think that Ward generally, while it will be explained away as just hexproof, I think the fact that there are like competitive ways to get, like, you know, like you target a thing, it's got ward. Like there are ways to be like, all right, no, like that goes to the graveyard, you know. While if you just reveal, like if it just had hexproof, you'd be like, no, this has hexproof, you can't target it. That would just go back to their hand. You just have information rather than a thing in their graveyard. And like sometimes that's nice, but I would say overwhelmingly having it countered is much better. And it gives also like, it gives way to cards that are like, that can't be countered, right? We saw this with Lear decks. Lear doesn't care about ward because spells can't be countered. A little bit of a side note again. Hello, side note. Before we get to the next 2 points, side note, we have 2 new text changes. Make the text boxes, because we've been getting more and more words in text boxes, they wanted to like clean it up. And I mean, honestly, if you're going to have a place to do it, might as well be the academic setting of Arcavios, you know? And with that, we have shuffle your deck just becomes shuffle, which, cool. I think that this is very valuable in terms of making words efficient. I mean, I'm not about optimization, but making the game more easy to understand and less intimidating to look at is great. This is also where we got CMC changes to mana value. And this is also, while less like strongly divisive, it is slightly divisive. I think that even if people aren't thinking about it, I know most people who've played before this, especially for any extended period of time, still generally call it CMC or converted mana cost. Mana value is generally the same thing. It is putting a number to the amount of mana that you put in. Now, this is different than mana cost, which includes colored pips. So, like, say, for instance, let's go to a card that we've already talked about, Adrix and Nev Twincasters. The mana cost is blue, green, 2, which means you pay a blue, a green, and 2 of generic mana. Converted mana cost, generally speaking, is 4, mana value is also 4. They are synonymous. I think what is interesting about this is that CMC generally feels already fairly straightforward. It feels self-explanatory, but converted mana cost, while it rolls off the tongue, is a lot of letters. It's big, it's long. Mana value, short, concise, to the point. I don't think it's as self-explanatory, which I challenge you that if you're teaching a new player what mana value means, try not to call it CMC and see how that goes. Because I feel like most people who have explained mana value end up using converted mana cost or CMC somewhere in that thing. Now, my penultimate point for how cool Strixhaven was as a set are the MDFCs. I think that the MDFCs continued to expand from Kaldheim, where... Were they in Ikoria? I don't remember. What I like about the MDFCs is that it gives you an option, right? They're modal double-faced cards. Modal being the optimal, or not optimal, the key word there. And I think what makes the modal part so interesting is that we've had double-faced cards for a long time. And giving you an option to which side you play makes it so that you can't play the other side. I like that there are mechanics with how it works in your hand, like it's always the front side. Anywhere other than the stack, it is the front side. On the stack, it's whichever side you choose, and then on the battlefield, it's whichever side you choose. So when they started this, the easiest thing to do was make the back a land. This proved to be successful. Got a lot of people talking about it. And honestly, I think overall, those are very valuable game pieces. I think that the fact that you could choose between an instant or sorcery and a land, or a creature or a land, was really big. I think that Zendikar really hit it out of the park with the MDFCs. Now, fast forward to May 2021, and we've got on the horizon new MDFCs, where the back is either a creature with regards to the Deans, or the backside is an instant or sorcery. Now, I think that these are really cool in idea. It's a great idea. That is true. Yeah, it is the next logical evolution of what this mechanic can be. But I feel like they they did what they could with the execution. With so many double-faced cards, you usually get some sort of reminder in the bottom right corner, or like cutting into the text box of like what the other side is, whether it's, like, oh, on the back is on the back is a 6/6. Like, oh, this werewolf turns into a 6/6 type of thing. Cool. That's neat. With Zendikar, it just says like land, green, it's a green land on the back. With creatures, with especially creatures, with creatures, we saw it with werewolves. It's fine. You kind of know. But, like, with werewolves, especially, like, it's going to flip or it's not going to flip. You don't get to really choose which side you put it down on. So you're always going to put it down face up. And with that, you don't have, like, your opponents will have that information at that point. With lands, you can see like, oh, the backside of this, just from your hand, having it still hidden information is like, oh, the backside of this is a green land. Great. With instants and sorceries, you may just not remember, like, oh, like, what does this instant or sorcery do? What, it becomes a little bit jumbled. You got to kind of pull it out of your sleeve, whatever. And I mean, to an extent, then you have your blank helper cards where you can be like, okay, like, this is the thing I slot into the deck, and then I'll have, the things over here. So like Wandering Archaic, for example, is a 5-mana creature, and if an opponent plays a spell, you can copy it unless they pay 2 type of thing. I think it's instants and sorceries. The backside is each player gains 3 life. What is it? Exactly. This is my point. It does so much that it's hard to remember without pulling it out of the sleeve, looking at the back, and then the opponent knows what's happening. But I think the biggest thing that Strixhaven did was took the Ravnica idea of color pairs, and they really jumbled it up. And it's so much to ask for a fan base to not like stick to the in-universe guilds, right? Like, if you like, there's a chance you've already been doing that, but to an extent, the card design has already led you to stick to like blue-black is Dimir, but like red-white is Boros. And like soldier type, like very like structured and attacky. But like with Strixhaven, we got Lorehold. And like Lorehold was about like uncovering ancient artifacts and a lot of like artifact stuff and a lot of like graveyard shenanigans. And you really saw this in the Commander product. I think that certain of the schools really kind of fell by the wayside in terms of like the shakeup. We've got Prismari, which ended up just kind of being spell slingery stuff, but it was with regard to the contrast of Izzet, it like they're both kind of samey. I think that Prismari did some cool things in terms of like performance stuff, but like if you know anything about Ral Zarek, he is kind of just like a live wire, like that's kind of all like that's almost already what it was, but it's like the yin and yang of engineering and performance. They're very similar in idea, even if they don't seem it at first. And then Quandrix blue-green, which I mean the Simic and Quandrix are kind of all about tokens and big numbers and counters, which, like, I guess, like, to an extent, the fact that both of these have blue says more about it than really anything. I think blue has just kind of wide swaths of what Magic can do and wants to do. You pair it up with something like the perfect secondary colors of green or red, and it becomes hard to be innovative. But I think that even so, these schools did a lot to shake up what you could do with your commanders, what you could do with these colors, what you could do, really, really, even so much as like, oh, like this is how you build something new. I think it also didn't necessarily destroy the color pie. I think that like they were really intentional in not crossing over too much. I mean, I think that like I think Prismari is I mean, some of my like the Prismari cards, especially from Strixhaven and C21, are some of the most bombastic, like over the top, like what is going on here type of cards. But I also feel like Lorehold has very grounded, no pun intended, structure of what it can do with red and white. And I think even so much as like Witherbloom sure is about like decay and like growth out of the dirt and grime, but like I think that getting like life gain being like a very vital role there is just like a fun little twist, and I think that it really did a number to, I don't know, get a lot of people out of that Ravnican mindset. And I'm really interested. So while doing research on this too, like it was noted a few times of like these schools were made up of the enemy color pairs. And while the enemy color pair guilds in Ravnica are about what the colors have in common, the schools are about what they don't have in common. And I think that that's very interesting to like think of conceptually. Maybe we'll talk about it again in another episode. Maybe the next time we go to Arcavios. Maybe we'll see another school on Arcavios that isn't Strixhaven that do the allied pairs, you know? And I think that it's going to be interesting next time we go to Arcavios if we do. And it's going to be even more interesting to go back to Ravnica, which we absolutely will. Whether we want to or not, Ravnica will be on the horizon eventually. And so it'll be interesting to see how these guilds are structured with the knowledge that like these color pairs are more than what we've been told. And I think all of this goes to show that Strixhaven was a magnificent set. I think that there was a lot to be said. I think that there was a lot that like they tried. And I think that like there are so many things that we can take away from Strixhaven and C21 that honestly, like, I hope they continue to iterate on. I think Demonstrate, I will say time and time again, is one of my most wanted mechanics for more than just the 5 cards that we have. And I think that especially in a casual commander setting, I think that like it is super, you know, like it just wants the whole table to just do something. It involves others. It is remarkably just exciting, and gives you potential for more than just optimizing your turn, you know. And I'm excited for the next time we return to Arcavios or Ravnica, or I mean the next time we get a new commander mechanic type of thing. So that's all I got for today. That's all I got time for. But hopefully next week we'll see Bruce. So signing off, we're Temple of Falsepod. I'm Temple of the Falsepod. Where my decks are not optimized, but my plays sure as heck are fun. This sounds really inflated. I'm Andy. Have a great night. May your 5th land be the Temple. Wait, before you go, just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter at falsepodmtg. Bruce is at ManaBurned, and I'm at Andy Weekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your 5th land be the Temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!